This video is a continuation of our previous lesson in that we learned a lot about CSS selectors in the last one, but we spoke a lot about this important concept of specificity. So we're kind of lumping them together in the same realm, where this is the part 2 of CSS specificity, where we rehash some ideas and learn a few others just to make sure that you understand what's going on at the end of the day. At the end of this lesson, you will be able to demonstrate CSS specificity and inheritance to create and update styles. So we're actually going to continue on our follow-along exercise that we wrote in our last program. So let's go back over CSS inheritance. What does the C in CSS stand for? Cascading style sheets. Cascading means that there is a pattern of inheritance that we can use in our code. This is similar to human characteristics that are passed down from generation to generation. Children will inherit physical and personality traits from their parents. In CSS, every ancestor of the original parent will gain access to all the CSS properties through inheritance. Inheritance is achieved through HTML structure. And when an element is placed inside another element, it becomes a child of that outer element. And of course, nesting HTML creates a bond, so to speak, between parent and child. There is a built-in mechanism of inheritance between parent and child. So when you nest an HTML element with inside another one, that inner element will get some of those styles. So an example of this is we could have a div whose class is parent, who wraps a p parent tag and a div whose class is child, and p tag, div, class of grandchild, so on and so forth. We could get this whole inheritance pattern here. But notice the structuring of this code. It looks kind of like a tree with, kind of these ideas or branches, and it's an ancestral tree if you were to sort of remap this and map it out. Okay? If we wanted to then style these elements, we could just simply select parent. And what do you think would happen? Well, the output of this code, you can go ahead and try it in your browser right now, would be that parent, child, and grandchild all receive the color red. So it goes back to this idea of CSS specificity. We touched at this at length in our previous video. The ability to style many or just one element specifically. Okay, that's what specificity means. Selectors allow us to add HTML tags to update their styles. Think of it like a waterfall. This waterfall of ideas that cascade down each to the next one. Kind of that idea of that markup tree that we just saw, how each thing can be applied down the waterfall. Many cascading waterfalls. So let's review our selectors by weight before we dig into some code. The first one is the universal or the wildcard selector. Then we have element selectors when we're just simply selecting headers or footers or tags. Of course, we have IDs and, of course, classes, pseudoclasses, and attributes. And of course, we also have inline styles, which we didn't go over in our follow-along, but there's a reason for that. It's because we'll never use them. And then, of course, the important tag, which we demonstrated, but we said, hey, don't use that unless you know when to use it. It's just one of those things that you'll know when. So let's see what this looks like in some code. Go ahead and open up that code sandbox from the previous lesson because we're going to tweak it and we're going to use it to write our own styles. Okay, so for this tutorial, what we're going to do is we're actually going to be building some CSS selector chains to demonstrate specificity and inheritance. Okay, so CSS specificity begins with HTML structure. Let's go ahead and let's take all of this and delete it. If you wanted to, you could have forked that one to have reference to it. But if we go ahead and save that and run it, we're just going to go back to our native HTML structure that we had before. So now what we're going to do is we're going to check out how this specificity is carried over with HTML at first. So we can see that there is a class that we call container. Okay. If I was to style container, it would then affect the header, the H1, the nav, the anchor tags, the entire generational tree of this document. So let's go ahead and write a selector, a class selector of container, and let's apply some styles to this. We're going to apply a width of 600 pixels and a margin of 0 top and bottom, and auto left and right. Think about what this is going to do in your head really quick. What do you think this is going to do? How do you think it's going to turn out? Go ahead and save it and run it. And notice that we just got some margin on our of a 0 on top and bottom, and then auto on our left and right. So we added some margins to this. But if I were to select this and inspect it, we could pull open the box model, which we're going to learn about later. We can look at our container and you can see that we now have some margins of auto on the left and right, and then 0 on the top and bottom. So our top and bottom margins are 0, and then left and right gets 53.2 units on the auto because our content is 600 pixels wide. Okay. If we were to bump this content down a little bit, you'd see that we would fit the page. If we changed it to 50%, we would automatically sort of center this on our page across our document. Okay, but let's keep it right where we want it. Let's go ahead and close that and refresh. And we should get our margins on the left and right. So automatically we sort of affected the rest of these things as well. All of the content within container is now centered on the page, well, so to speak. It's centered somewhat. It's sort of justified a little bit. Okay. So what we're going to do now is we're going to, this is demonstrating the cascading impact of all the elements inside the container with just a few simple lines. So let's increase our specificity chain by styling everything in the header to have a font family of Helvetica. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to say not only inside of container, so everything that's inside of container, but also everything inside of the header is going to get the font family, Helvetica. Caps are important here. And then we can also kind of chain some things on if the document or if the browser doesn't have those fonts built in. We can default to sans serif or Arial, so to speak. Okay, notice how we're selecting things here. Selecting by class and then by element. Okay, let's go ahead and save that and run it. And notice that all of our content changed. All of our content was affected. So we could have wrote because of this cascade, all of our elements in our header now have a font family of Helvetica. We could have written this and we could have just selected the header, but we wanted to sort of extend these styles to anything in the container as well. Okay, so this is good and all. All of our items here inside of our little markup tree have received Helvetica as a font family. So this is great and all, but what if we wanted just to select one single element? Styling many elements is pretty easy because of the cascade, but what about styling one specific element? So let's select the main header class and style its color to crimson. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to say the container and the header, and then the main header have a color of crimson. Container, main header, header, and just the main header will have the crimson. Notice that our other things were not affected. We are specifically targeting one single thing, one item here. So you can chain your classes, your selectors, just like this. It's really nice, really handy for selecting one single thing at a time. We could have written the above chain with an H1 and achieved the same result. Virtually nothing changes. But if we wanted to be extremely specific, we could use both the element and the class together to achieve this. So if we're just saying, no matter what, we want this to be a very specifically targeted main header, you could write it like this. We're saying the H1, whose class is main header, gets this as well. So we just did the same thing 3 different ways with the same result. Some developers see this as a powerful aspect of CSS. Others point this out as a reason CSS is so confusing. Our opinion is that you should know several ways to do the same thing in case you run into a unique situation where you need to specify weight and allow that weight to be heavier. At this point, you should attempt to style the anchor tags inside the navigation. Explore the several different ways you could write your specificity chains. Follow along with the link that's found in the tutorial here in Training Kit and complete that challenge. If you get stuck on anything, you can check your code against a final solution for this tutorial at a link that's found right here inside of Training Kit. Thanks for tuning in on our part 2 about specificity and selectors. We hope you're starting to understand and feel that this stuff is actually a lot of fun. It's really cool to apply these ideas, these styles, these elements to our web pages.